a minute to introduce myself. My name is Glenda Phipps. I'm the chairperson of English at the Inter-American campus, which is a little ways down the road from here in Little Havana, but happy to be here at Wolfson. This is the 32nd anniversary of the fair. How many people have been to the fair before? Oh, yeah.
Nice.
How many people are friends of the fair? Yeah, we got a couple. Oh, yeah. We're all friendly to the fair, whether we're friends or friendly. After the writers speak and we hear a little bit about their book, they'll also be signing right outside in the red autographing area, right outside the door, so we'll show you that. We always want to thank our sponsors, the Bachelor Foundation, Knight Foundation, and OHL Oriano, because they're so great, and the many people who also sponsor us. Many of you sponsor us with that. We'll have a chance for questions and answers after each person goes, but let me introduce them both first, and then more in depth the first person. Yeah? I'm sorry?
I have to go and speak for
Oh, you're introducing somebody? Oh, that's fantastic.
Nice.
You make my job easier. And are you going to be introducing Jennifer Nielsen?
Yes.
Oh, the first one, great. So the two authors that we have today are Jennifer Nielsen and Margi Preuss. I think I got it right. Did I get it right? All right, close enough. We're going to have Ms. Preuss go first, and then it'll be you, okay? So you want to take a seat right there, and I'll bring you up when we do Ms. Nielsen, all right? So let me introduce Margi Preuss first. Margi Preuss is the author of the acclaimed novels West of the Moon, Heart of a Samurai, and Shadow on the Mountain. She also writes and co-writes plays, sketches, and adaptations for theater. The Bamboo Sword, which you see up here, is her latest novel. Set in 1853 in Japan, this novel follows Yoshi, a Japanese boy who dreams of someday becoming a samurai, despite his birth to the servant class. He's taken up by Manhiro, the protagonist of Preuss's Heart of a Samurai, and becomes his servant and secret watchdog. Meanwhile, Commodore Matthew Perry and USS Susquehanna squadron of steamships arrive in Edo Bay, demanding diplomatically that Japan opens its ports to foreign trade. Aboard the Commodore's flagship is a cabin boy, Jack, who becomes separated from his American companions while on shore. When he and Yoshi cross paths, they set out on a grand adventure to get Jack back to his ship before he is discovered by the Shogun's samurai. Margi Preuss. Okay, thank you.
Well, thanks for that great introduction. I'm really super happy to be in Miami, and not just because at home where I live in northern Minnesota right now, 20 degrees and snowing. No, also because it's just so great to be around people who read, to see all these books, and to see people carrying books around, and knowing that
Jennifer A. Nielsen is the author of the New York Times and U.S. Today best-selling Ascendance trilogy, The False Prince, The Runaway King, The Shadow Throne. She has also written The Underworld Chronicles, a humorous middle-grade fantasy series. In her latest middle-grade thriller, A Night Divided Scholastic Press, a girl must escape to freedom after the Berlin Wall divides her family between the East and the West. With the rise of Berlin Wall, 12-year-old Gerda finds her family suddenly divided. She, her mother, and her brother Fritz live on the eastern side, controlled by the Soviets. Her father and middle brother, who had gone to the West in search of work, cannot return home. One day, while on her way to school, Gerda spots her father on a viewing platform on the western side, pantomiming a peculiar dance. Then, when she receives a mysterious drawing, Gerda concludes that her father wants Gerda and Fritz to tunnel beneath the wall out to the East Berlin. However, if they are caught, the consequences will be deadly. No one can be trusted. Will Gerda and her family find a way to freedom?
What's your name? Fantastic. Excellent job. How old are you?
14.
Okay, when I was 14, I could not have done that. Really, when I was 14, I would have stood up and, drooled. It would have been really awkward. Thank you. You did a wonderful job. And with that introduction, I think a lot of what I need to talk about is kind of there. These are some of the books that I have written. I have no idea what's for sale out there because it was like windy and rainy in Iran. So, if you find something, my name's on it, I probably wrote it. Okay, that's the whole standard. But I really want to start, and I'm going to tell you about this book right here to start. Scholastic had a series called Infinity Ring, and a different author wrote each of the books. And I was going to write book 6 of that series. This is a time traveling thing where these kids go back to fix time. In book 6, Behind Enemy Lines, which is right here, this was a World War II Germany book. And I wrote this story and I had the best time with it. It's one of like the coolest spy stories in the history of the war. Like of everything that happened, it's one of the best stories that came out of World War II. I had the greatest time. And when I finished editing it, my editor said to me, okay, great, you're done. You can go back to your other projects now and just move on. And the problem was I wasn't ready to move on. I had so enjoyed writing this book and learning about this world. And I started just thinking more and more about it. And so you need to know, I'm a history minor, all right? I study it. And then I started asking myself, as a history minor, whatever happened to Germany after the war? Like, I know some of the big stuff, but I don't know how those big things came to be. I'm a history minor. And I started thinking about the way that World War II is often taught in schools. This is how it's often taught. All right? The teacher says, Germany lost, then the bell rings, and then it's summer. All right? And then history's done. Like, that's it. Now we've learned all the history we need to know. We know that Germany lost. Well, the thing is that what happened to Germany after the war is actually super significant. This is Germany after the war. All right? This is, oh no, I want to show it to you. This is Germany after the war. That makes more sense. This is Germany. This is the way we left it. Germany was completely bombed out. It was leveled. All right? Which means homes that used to be no longer were. Buildings that used to be no longer were. And with the absence of those two things meant no jobs. Not nearly enough food to go around. And the people of Germany kind of went back to the world and they said, we are starving. And the world said to Germany, guess you shouldn't have started that world war, huh? All right, not a lot of sympathy. There wasn't a lot of sympathy given out. Even though most of the people in Germany had no part to play in the Holocaust, most of the people in Germany weren't even members of the Nazi Party. But the world largely turned its back on. It's the first thing we did to Germany. The second thing we did to Germany is we said, all right, you're largely responsible for the start of World War I. You're definitely responsible for the start of World War II. We do not want a Germany ever again strong enough to start the next wars. So the decision was made to divide Germany into parts. And each of the major victors or allies in the war was going to take a part. So you can see here that Great Britain took 1/4 of Germany, France took 1/4, the would you like to run the country with us? Well, after within a few years of the war, Russia had become communist. All right, and it was the very, very early days of the Cold War. For kids, Cold War was an absolute standoff between East versus West, and it's who was going to be first to fire off the nuclear bomb. All right, and it was this huge standoff of let's agree to hate each other, but not have a war. All right, and so Russia said, no, we're not going to run our country with you. We're going to take our 1/4 of the country and we're going to call it East Germany. And our 1/4 of the capital we're going to call East Berlin. And so the two places became divided. This country became the heart, the very center of the Cold War, with the entire world watching it. But the problem is, the two halves of the country were very differently run. In the West, come on in if you're here to sit, find a seat, please. In the West, there were jobs, there was rebuilding, there were things available that you could go to and buy to start to build your life back again. All right, in the East, it was very different. They were very slow, very, very slow to rebuild. There weren't very many jobs, and even if you had money to take to the store, it didn't do you any good. There was nothing to buy. All right, and so people started leaving the East as quickly as they could, and there would be hundreds of people every day who were leaving the East just trying to get to the West. And it came a point when so many people were leaving that all of a sudden it occurs to Russia, we can have a country, this beautiful, beautiful country, that is empty. This right here is the dedication page of A Night Divided. If you open to the dedication page, it'll say, for Ilona, who made it out, and for all those who didn't. When I was growing up, Ilona was a friend of our family's, and I was always kind of afraid of Ilona when I was a kid because she was German, and when she yelled at her kids, it was scary. And to make it worse, Ilona had this hair that's roughly the same color as the seats, but brighter orange, and she would pile it all on her head in this huge pile, which made Ilona just so scary to me. And so I made it like the point of my whole growing up, just stay out of Ilona's way, just do it. And but when I finished working on the Infinity Ring book, and I asked my mom, I said, Ilona was German, wasn't she? What was her story? And my mom said, you should call Ilona. And I says, I'm a grown up and I'm still afraid of Ilona. And mom said, call Ilona. All right. So I called her and I said, Ilona, I need your story. Here's Ilona's story. Ilona was born in the East. And it was before the Berlin Wall, but it was at a time when her family made the decision, we have to get out. She was 5. She was 5 years old. Her parents were going to leave in the countryside. All right, because in the countryside, the likelihood of bumping into an East German soldier was a lot lower, and they thought we have a better chance of crossing the border if we go into the country. They didn't want to bring Ilona because it's unpredictable. They didn't know what the weather would be like. Are we going to have, shelter opportunities? Are we going to be running for it? They didn't want to bring a 5-year-old girl. So Ilona's grandparents were going to come in from the West and take Ilona back by train. They can't seat Ilona in the passenger seats. Ilona has no papers. She'll be stopped at the border. So Ilona at 5 years old was drugged. And she was hidden in the baggage car of the train beneath a pile of hay, where her grandparents knew full well that if she so much as rolled over when those East German police were searching her baggage car, Ilona could be shot or arrested. And her grandparents could be shot or arrested. That is how our family friend Ilona made it out of East Germany. All right? Which it was a very stark reminder to me that the stories that I tell, the story that Margie tells, these are real people's lives. All right? As the East Germans are exiting the country, Walter Ulbricht, he was the General Secretary of East Germany. So you think of him like the president, all right? He was point blank asked at a press conference. People said, hey, we've kind of heard maybe there's got to be a wall to stop East Germans from leaving. Is there going to be a wall? He said at that press conference on June 15th, 1961, he says nobody has the intention to erect a wall. When Walter Ulbricht said this is a bold-faced lie to the entire world. Because even as he said these words, he was working with Moscow on a wall. 2 months later, we started to see it happening. So depending on your age, this is your lifetime or your parents' lifetime or your grandparents' lifetime, not so long ago. The date was August 13th, 1961. In history, we call it Barbed Wire Sunday. people know something is different. And so they get dressed and they go out onto the streets. And when they go out onto the streets, this is the scene that greets them. Right here you can see the East German citizens. These soldiers right here, this isn't the enemy soldiers, this is their own soldiers. Their own soldiers, sort of like the Florida National Guard or the U.S. Army. This is their own soldiers, and you notice which way those guns are aimed. Not toward the enemy. And the message became very clear. You try to leave this barbed wire fence, you will be shot. And yes, that included children. That barbed wire fence went up around the entire city. Now there's a bit of a misnomer about how the barbed wire fence went up. This is the capital of Berlin. You can see it right there in the heart of Russian territory. This is the east. No need to put a wall around the east because they can travel anywhere within that red zone just fine because it's the east. The fence went up around West Berlin. This yellow zone, that's freedom. That is the free territory. All you have to do if you want to get out of that sort of a situation is you just have to make it into that yellow territory. Well, how bad can it be, right? That barbed wire fence, over time, became the Berlin Wall. And within just a few years, it became the Berlin Wall. This right here is a diagram of what it would have been like. This area right here was known as the death strip. All right, the death strip ran right along the border. Now, in some cases, it wasn't very wide, maybe as wide as this theater. In some cases, it could be as wide as a football field, end zone to end zone. If you wanted to get across the death strip, this is all you had to do, all right? You have to be aware of one thing. This right here is in the east. There's ground right here that you can't see very well because of the lights here in the theater, but there's ground right here in the east. Now, if you are close enough on that ground, if you are close enough just to touch the wall, you don't have to be trying to escape it. If you're close enough to touch it, that is grounds for your arrest. Now, when you were arrested in East Berlin, it's not like, the police come and they haul you off to the station and yell at you and then call your parents. If you're close enough to touch that wall in East Berlin, when you were arrested, you disappear. All right? And nobody's going to come and get you because nobody knew where the prisons were in East Berlin. Maybe you would be let free, maybe not. All right? That's just if you're close enough to touch it. This wall right here would have been 12 feet high. And then you can see that concrete tube on the top of it. The concrete tube had two functions. Number one, it would require you to lean backward in order to reach over it, which is a very difficult position to attain. The second thing it did is it prevented you from having any good grip on the wall because it's round. But if you've got the right kind of ladder and you can get over that 12-foot wall, the first thing you're going to do is you're going to land into a sand trap. This was raked smooth every day. Now, the reason it was raked out smooth is so that as soon as your feet go down, police, the guards there at the border, they can track your footsteps. They can say, oh, this is the way they ran. And it gives them a very easy way to follow you and to trace you through there. Right here, you're going to encounter a series of wires. The wires would have likely done one of two things. The first thing they might do is just by touching the wire, you put your hand on it, and automatic rifle fire goes off. All right, and it's just going to be a line of rifles that are headed straight toward you and anybody that is with you. The second thing that touching that wire might do is it might send a signal to the guard tower right here, which means that area is immediately going to get bathed in light. They will release the dogs if they have them, and rifle fire is going to start raining down from that guard tower. But if you get past that, you're going to go into the tank trap right here. The tank trap was dug like a V. It prevented tanks from the west from just crashing through the wall and letting everybody go through, because as soon as you go down, you don't have a position to maneuver back up again. All right, it would have also prevented a family in East Germany from crashing their car through and just driving straight through, because you'll hit that tank trap. But once you get past it, then you have what is called the Berlin Wall. That's when we speak of the Berlin Wall. That's the last of the hurdles you have to get over. That is another 12-foot high wall. But if you get over it, now you're free. These are some pictures that are taken. In the west, viewing platforms were built so that somebody could stand in the west and they could look into the east. This right here was very striking to me. This is her wedding day. This is her family right here. This is as much as her family got to participate in the day she was married. This right here is a girl who's just walking This wasn't some extraordinary, strange sort of event, some like really crazy day in her life. This was everyday walk to school. Where it would have been a normal thing to pass a soldier who's holding a gun, who's ready to shoot you if you take a step toward him. That's just another day in the life of an East German school child. This right here is one of the early escape attempts that was made. There's actually video of it that you can see online. If you want to get online, it's fascinating. These are students. They're on a dead run. Dead run's a bad choice of word. They're on a run. All right? They are running for this fence as quickly as they can. Now, the boys get to it first, and the boys are pulling apart the barbed wire fence to help this girl in the sweater get through. And as they pull it apart, you can see him looking back, which means there's somebody or something he's checking for right there. They are in a huge hurry. That girl goes through the barbed wire fence, and when she does, she cuts the corner of her head. She gets a gash on that barbed wire. All right, blood starts pouring down the side of her face. And as she runs through this fence and into freedom, she has the largest smile on her face that you can possibly imagine. She doesn't care about the injury. All she knows is she just bought her freedom with that wound, and she could not be happier. But for every story of success, there are other stories. This was another student. Students were the most likely to attempt escapes. This was another student who was making a run straight through the death strip, hoping that if he just ran fast enough, he could outrun the rifle fire. He didn't. He fell literally within inches of West Germany, within inches. And the West German soldiers, American soldiers in this case, stood here with the boy's hand here. All right, that close. And he shot, and he is pleading with them, please help me, I'm right here. And those soldiers knew if they did so much as grab his hand and drag that boy to safety, that would have been the start of World War III. So all they could do was stand there and watch for 1 hour as that boy slowly died. And after his death, this is him being carried away by an East German soldier. His death was most likely reported to his family as a heart attack. All right? Into this world, I introduce Gerda. Gerda's father and brother, as said in the introduction. Gerda's father and brother on Friday are going into West Berlin to look for a place to live, to look for a job. That would have been 2 days too late because they are still in the West on barbed wire Sunday. And leaving behind Gerda, her older brother Fritz, and their mother. If Gerda's father and brother try to come back from the West, they're going to be arrested. If her brother and mother and her try to leave the East, they are going to be shot. A Night Divided is the story of what this girl is going to attempt to do in order to bring her family back together again. Now, the theme that we are talking about here is bravery in the face of danger. One of the great, wonderful things about me getting to talk to you this month is because of what this man said, Dr. Martin Luther King, who said, freedom is never voluntarily given by the oppressor. It must be demanded by the oppressed. Beginning on November 9th, 1989, if you were old enough then, you were exactly where I was, straight in front of your television set. And you were watching Tom Brokaw, who was standing on Checkpoint Charlie as the wall came down. 1989, this happened. All right? What is so amazing about the Berlin Wall is that in the end, it wasn't brought down by treaties, it wasn't brought down by war or soldiers or governments. In the end, it was the people who brought down their own wall. In the end, it was the people who said, we refuse to remain imprisoned 1 day more. The people brought down their own wall. And so as Margie and I talk about bravery in the face of danger, I think the most powerful message is that the way that power is taken is it is demanded by the oppressed. All right, I think we're going to open to questions. All right.
Any questions for either of the authors?
What encouraged you guys
To start writing. I started writing in kindergarten when my kindergarten
teacher always put on a musical every year, and the year I was 5, it was Sleeping Beauty. Guess which part I wanted to play? You are right. Okay, guess which part I did not get? You're also right. So while I was waiting in the wings to come out in my little teeny tiny part, I had an idea. I could write my own plays, and then I could star in them. So that's what I started doing. I didn't really technically know how to write in kindergarten, but I knew how to make stuff up. So I started making up plays, and then I just kept doing that, and I did that for most of my life, although I stopped actually performing in them and just started writing them somewhere along the line. And and then I started writing books because I love reading. I think that's really just the heart of it. You can't be a writer if you're not a reader. Right? That'd be like being a cook that doesn't like to eat food.
Or in my case, I love to eat food, but I can't cook. When I was growing up, I didn't know authors were real people. Like, really, I just didn't know that. I thought authors were like dead, right? All the dead guys. Or that they lived these super special lives in like exotic places like Maine. And so I just didn't know that you could be like, because I was this ordinary kid. I was like, there was nothing special about me. There was nothing, where I was this outstanding person. I was like, well, I don't think you can be an ordinary person and grow up to be an author. So I had no ideas. Like, I always had the stories, and I was always writing them, but it was just hobby, and it was fun. It was never with the intention of I could be an author one day, until 6th grade. And in 6th grade, I read The Outsiders by S.E. Hinton. I love it. Love it. All right, S.E. Hinton. And she was it was the first time I ever became interested in the author. And I looked her up, and I found out she started writing it when she was 14 years old. I was 11. And I thought, well, wait a minute. 14 is not dead yet. And that seems like a real person thing. Like, being a teenager, for some reason, seemed like a real person thing, even though now as an adult, I understand teenagers aren't real people at all. But when I was 11, I thought they were. And so all of a sudden, it seemed real. And I thought, if S.E. Hinton can write a book, I can write a book. I am a writer today because of S.E. Hinton. Yes.
Have you ever visited where the Berlin Wall was?
Have I visited the Berlin Wall? I have not. The writing of this book, just because of a number of factors, was sort of insane. Between the time when I decided I was going to write it, I hadn't done my research, I hadn't put a word down on page. So from the minute I did my first bit of research, put the first word on page, to the day I sent it to Scholastic was 5 weeks, which is, I didn't shower a lot that month. That was not a good month to be around my airspace. And so there really wasn't time, but I will tell you, a few weeks ago, I went to Poland. I was at an American school there, and the librarian said to me, she says, there's 8 moms here at this school who are from Germany. They want to meet you. I was like, oh, this could be either really good or really bad, and I really didn't know which way it was going to go, because I knew that every single one of them would have grown up in either East or West Germany. And I didn't know how it was going to go, and these 8 moms sat down with me, and I said, how many of you are from the West? 6 of the moms raised their hands. How many of you were born in the East? 2 of the moms kind of did this. And after the meeting, one of the moms from East Germany, she pulled me aside and she says, I read your book. And she says, that was my life. That was the life that I had. And she says, I want you to know, this is the first time in my life I could ever say I am proud to have come from East Germany. So it is my great hope to get over to Berlin soon. I haven't been there yet, but I do feel like, at least by the people who grew up there, that I did them justice.
Final question?
This question's for both of you. I'm curious about the research process that you go through to get all the background info for your stories. How do you begin, and briefly, just an overview of what is the process around?
Agony. I went to Japan, especially for this book, and in fact, it was in Japan when I was promoting the Japanese edition of Heart of a Samurai that I became really interested in writing this book. I would never have thought that I should write books about Japanese subjects because, I'm not automatically an expert. But this book has been very, very well received in Japan. And while I was there, I was doing a lot of interviews. And in one of them, someone asked me, what Japanese historical figures do American children learn about in school? Can you answer that?
All of them.
Yeah, there aren't any really. Maybe Hirohito. I should maybe use this so it's easier to hear. So that really stuck with me, that moment, because what I said was, I'm not an expert, but I think maybe only Hirohito. And there was a gasp in the room and kind of horror. And that moment just stuck with me, and I kept thinking about it. And I had, because of writing this book, I had learned a lot about the young, mostly poor, mostly masterless samurai who studied with Manjiro, character in this book, and encounter him in this book. And they studied English with him and learned what he understood about democracy in America. And they were the people that transformed Japan into a modern society. So I just started studying them and reading what I could about Sakamoto Ryoma, who is the Benjamin Franklin of Japan, and many others, all of whom you can read about in the extensive author's note, because I put little bios of the major players. None of them, their lives did not end well. Let's put it that way. They all died young and not of natural causes. So they put their lives on the line to bring Japan, take Japan from a shogunate to a democracy, which often happens. Yoshi is a young, brave person. I guess I didn't really talk about being brave in the face of danger, but he has to get this poor American kid back to the ships while being chased by the shogun's spies. So I read a lot. I watched a lot of samurai movies. And I looked at a lot of woodblock art prints, went to museums. There's beautiful armor at the Met in New York City to look at. And woodblock prints turned out to be a great resource because they show everyday life, what people are wearing, what people are eating, what they're doing. And I ended up using a lot of details from those prints in the story, as details in the story.
The trick with history is that history is always told through a filter. Usually the filter of the victors or the people in power. And for that reason, it's always a very daunting challenge to be sure that you are not just playing along with that filter, or that you are not putting your own filter on the story. And so one of the things I tried very hard to do is to stick to first-person sources as much as I could. So rather than read what somebody else had written about their research, I thought, no, I want to hear it from the people who lived there. And so crazy as it is, I watched a lot of YouTube, because YouTube documents, there's a lot of interviews with people. There's an interview, for example, with a man who is standing on a road in East Berlin, and you can see where the road divots in. And he says, right beneath this road is where I was tunneling. And he says, this divot is because right here is where my tunnel started to collapse as I was digging, and it was starting to collapse the road. And he said, if the Stasi had driven over this road while I was tunneling out, I wouldn't be here today. I'd be dead. And so there's a scene in here where the character's tunnel starts to collapse, only theirs collapses right in the middle of the death strip. But the reason it starts to collapse is to give honor to that man who actually did it. So as much as I could, I tried to stick to those first-person sources to ensure that the story I told is the way it was, not the way I wanted it to be.
Well, thank you to both. There will
Thank you. Thank you all for coming.